What if the sun exploded? It began without sound, without warning, a silent fracture at the heart of the sky that no one could see, yet somehow everyone felt, as if something ancient and constant had blinked for the first time since the beginning of memory. And in that imperceptible instant, the balance of everything shifted. Though on Earth, the morning still arrived like any other, pale light stretching over cities and oceans, people waking to alarms, traffic building in familiar patterns, unaware that far beyond the fragile blue atmosphere, the star that had cradled life for billions of years had begun to unravel. Not in fire at first, but in instability, a subtle trembling of forces that had always held it together. And then, slowly, the change became visible, as sunlight itself seemed to thicken, its warmth slightly harsher, its color just a fraction too white, like a photograph overexposed by an unseen hand. And scientists noticed first, their instruments whispering of impossible readings, energy outputs rising in ways no model could explain, fluctuations that should not exist, numbers that refused to stabilize. And as they stared at screens filled with data that defied understanding, a realization spread among them with cold precision. Not panic, but certainty, the kind that leaves no room for denial. And they spoke quietly at first, hesitant to give shape to something so final, until the words could no longer be contained. The sun is destabilizing. The sun is collapsing outward. The sun is going to explode. And when the announcement reached the world, it did not arrive as chaos, but as disbelief, because the human mind is not built to accept the end of everything it depends on. And so people argued, dismissed, scrolled past headlines, clung to normal routines as if repetition itself could hold reality together. But the sky continued to change, the light growing sharper each day, shadows becoming unnaturally defined, temperatures rising not gradually, but in uneven surges that made seasons meaningless. And nights began to shorten, not by minutes but by hours, darkness retreating as the sun swelled ever so slightly in the sky, its edges no longer perfectly round, its surface flickering with patterns that looked almost like motion when observed too long. And governments spoke of preparation, of underground shelters, of solutions that sounded complete but felt hollow, because there is no shelter from a star, no bunker deep enough to escape the reach of something that defines the very existence of light and heat. And still humanity tried, as it always had, building, planning, calculating timelines that stretched weeks, then days, then hours, while the sun grew brighter still, until looking at it was no longer possible even through protection, its presence pressing against the eyes like a physical force. And then came the moment when doubt vanished completely, when the sky itself became wrong, when the blue faded into a pale, almost metallic hue, and the sun expanded just enough that anyone who dared to glance upward could see that it was no longer what it had been, its surface boiling, shifting, breaking into vast arcs of energy that stretched and snapped back like threads under impossible tension. And in that moment, the world fell into a silence deeper than any noise, because every person, regardless of where they stood, understood at the same time that this was not something that could be stopped or survived in the way survival had always been imagined. This was not a disaster within the world. This was the end of the system itself. And yet life continued in those final hours, people gathering not out of instruction but instinct, families sitting together without speaking, strangers sharing spaces without fear, the usual boundaries dissolving because they no longer mattered. And as the sun reached the point of no return, its core collapsing even as its outer layers surged outward, the light intensified beyond comprehension, a brilliance that erased detail, that flattened the world into pure illumination. And for a brief, immeasurable span of time, there was no distinction between shadow and form, between sky and ground, everything held within a single overwhelming presence. And then it happened, not as an explosion in the way human minds expect, but as a release, a sudden, total unbinding of energy that had been contained for billions of years, a wave of light and radiation racing outward at the speed that defines the universe itself, carrying with it the memory of the star that had once been stable.
And on Earth, there was no time to react, no moment to process, only a final instant where the intensity became absolute, where perception itself dissolved under the weight of what was arriving. And in that instant, before everything was stripped away, before matter itself began to lose its structure under forces too great to resist, there was a strange and profound clarity. Not fear, not even acceptance, but a recognition of scale, of how small and temporary everything had always been in comparison to the vast processes that shaped existence. And then the wave reached the planet, and the oceans did not boil, but ceased to be as they had been, the atmosphere igniting not in flames, but in transformation, the surface of the world reshaped in fractions of a second, and beyond it the rest of the solar system followed, each planet touched in turn by the expanding shell of what had once been the sun, until there was nothing left of the familiar arrangement that had defined a corner of the galaxy, only a rapidly expanding cloud of energy and particles carrying outward the remnants of a system that had once held life. And as that expansion continued into the vast darkness beyond, spreading thinner and wider with every passing moment, there remained no trace of the world that asked the question, only the echo of it, embedded in the particles themselves, moving silently through space, part of something larger, something that would, in time, beyond comprehension, become something else entirely.
And as the expanding remnants of the star moved outward into the vast emptiness, thinning with distance yet never truly disappearing, the story did not end in absence, but transformed into something quieter, something stretched across time so immense it could no longer be measured in moments or lifetimes. Because what had once been a single star became a cloud of possibility, a drifting collection of particles carrying within them the memory of heat, of gravity, of balance. And as that cloud traveled through the galaxy, it encountered other currents, other remnants of long-forgotten stars, mixing, colliding, compressing in slow, patient motions that unfolded over millions of years. And in that motion, there was no intention, no awareness, only the natural tendency of matter to gather, to shape itself under the influence of forces that required no guidance. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, regions within that cloud began to thicken, gravity pulling fragments together, forming knots of density where once there had been only dispersion. And these knots grew, drawing in more material, becoming warmer, brighter, until at their centers something familiar began to emerge again, not as a continuation, but as a reformation, the birth of new stars from the ashes of what had come before. And among these forming systems, in one quiet region of the galaxy, a new star ignited, smaller than the one that had been lost, but stable, its light spreading outward for the first time, illuminating the surrounding dust and rock that had gathered into orbit around it. And within that orbit, fragments collided, merged, and cooled, forming planets that bore no memory of their origins beyond the particles themselves. And on one of those distant worlds, conditions aligned in a way that would, over time, give rise to complexity once again. Oceans forming from accumulated gases, atmospheres stabilizing under delicate balances. And within those oceans, the first simple structures began to appear, not as echoes of the past, but as entirely new expressions of the same underlying processes. Life emerging, not because it remembered, but because the conditions allowed it to exist. And as that life evolved, adapting, diversifying, growing in forms that had never been seen before, there remained no awareness of the star that had exploded, no knowledge of the system that had once been erased in an instant. And yet, in the deepest sense, everything that existed there was connected to that moment, every atom shaped by it, every bond influenced by the journey those particles had taken through space. And as time continued to unfold, civilizations would eventually rise again, beings capable of observing the sky, of questioning their place within it, of studying the stars that surrounded them.
And among those stars, they would see remnants, nebulae glowing faintly with the scattered remains of ancient explosions. And they would build theories, models, explanations for how stars live and die, how matter cycles through destruction and creation. And they would understand, at least in part, that the universe is not static, that everything they see is part of an ongoing process that does not begin or end in the ways they instinctively expect. And perhaps, in some distant future, one of those beings would look at their own star and ask a question that feels both new and strangely inevitable, wondering what would happen if it were to explode, unaware that the very atoms within them had once been part of that exact event, that their existence was not separate from it, but a continuation of its consequences. And in that quiet moment of curiosity, the cycle would, in a sense, come full circle, not through memory, but through the persistence of matter and the patterns it follows. And the universe would continue, not as a story with a defined beginning or end, but as an unfolding sequence of transformations, where even the most absolute endings become the foundation for something that follows. And within that endless progression, the question itself would remain, not as a fear, but as a reflection of the deeper truth that everything, no matter how stable it seems, is part of a process far greater than any single moment can contain. And in that realization, there is neither comfort nor despair, only the quiet understanding that existence is not defined by permanence, but by continuity.
And even that understanding, as clear as it might seem to those who reached it, would not remain fixed, because every generation that followed would reinterpret the same sky through its own perspective, building meanings shaped not only by observation, but by experience. And on that distant world, under the steady light of their young star, the beings who emerged would begin, as all life does, small and unaware, guided only by the immediate needs of survival. Yet over vast stretches of time, they would develop senses that reached beyond themselves, tools that extended their perception, and eventually thoughts that questioned not just how things worked, but why they existed at all. And in those questions, there would be something familiar, something that echoed across the ages, even without memory, because curiosity itself is not bound to any single species or planet. It arises wherever complexity reaches a point where it can reflect upon itself. And so they would look upward, charting the motion of their star, mapping the paths of neighboring lights, noticing patterns, regularities, deviations. And with each discovery, their understanding would grow, not in leaps, but in layers, built carefully upon what had been learned before. And among their earliest realizations would be the recognition that stars are not eternal, that even the brightest points in their sky have lifespans, that they are born, that they change, that they eventually end. And this knowledge would not arrive as fear at first, but as fascination, a desire to understand processes so vast they stretch beyond imagination. And as their science advanced, they would uncover the evidence written into the structure of their own world, the composition of their atmosphere, the distribution of elements within their planet, clues that pointed back to events that occurred long before their star existed. And they would come to see that everything around them had been shaped by the deaths of earlier stars, that creation and destruction are not separate phases, but parts of a continuous cycle. And for some, this realization would carry a quiet weight, not because it threatened them directly, but because it reframed their place in the universe, showing them that their existence was both incredibly specific and entirely universal at the same time. And as their civilization grew more complex, their focus would shift from understanding to influence, from observation to action, and they would begin to ask not only what happens when a star dies, but whether anything can be done to prepare for it, to extend the life of their own star, to move beyond its eventual limits. And these questions would lead them outward, beyond their planet, into the space that surrounds it, where they would build structures that orbit their star, devices that capture its energy, vessels that carry them to neighboring worlds.
And in doing so, they would slowly detach themselves from complete dependence on a single source, spreading their presence across multiple environments, creating systems that can endure even as conditions change. And yet, no matter how far they extend, the fundamental truth would remain unchanged, that the star at the center of their system will not last forever, that its stability is temporary, that its eventual transformation is inevitable. And as they approach the limits of what can be predicted, there will come a time when they face the same realization that had once spread across a distant, long-lost world, that there are forces beyond control, events that cannot be prevented, only understood and approached with whatever clarity they can achieve. And in that moment, their response will not be identical, because no two civilizations are ever exactly the same. But there will be a resemblance in the way they gather knowledge, in the way they seek connection, in the way they attempt to preserve what matters to them, whether through records, through shared experiences, or through the continuation of life beyond a single location. And perhaps, when their own star begins to change in ways that cannot be ignored, when its light shifts, when its behavior becomes unpredictable, they will not react with disbelief, because they will have already understood what it means, and instead of trying to deny it, they will face it as part of the larger process they have spent generations studying. And in doing so, they may find a different kind of resolution, not in avoiding the end, but in ensuring that what they have built does not end with it, that their existence becomes part of the same continuity that shaped them, spreading outward, carrying their influence into regions that will outlast their original home. And as their star eventually transforms, whether through explosion or quiet collapse, the light it releases will join the countless other remnants moving through the galaxy, and somewhere far beyond the reach of their own time, those remnants will again become the building blocks of something new. And within that future, another form of life may once again look upward and ask the same question, not knowing that the answer has already been written countless times in different ways, not as a fixed outcome, but as a pattern that repeats across the universe, changing in detail but constant in its essence. And so the question, what if the sun explodes, never truly belongs to a single world or moment. It exists wherever there is awareness capable of imagining it, and the answer is not a single event, but an ongoing process that continues long after any one observer is gone, unfolding quietly, endlessly, as part of the greater structure of existence itself.
And over spans of time so vast they erase the meaning of beginnings and endings, the pattern continues to unfold without pause, each transformation feeding into the next, each conclusion dissolving into the conditions for something new. And within this endless motion, there is a subtle shift that occurs wherever awareness arises. Because while matter follows its laws without intention, consciousness introduces something different, not control over the process, but reflection upon it, the ability to perceive continuity where there appears to be only change. And on countless worlds scattered across the galaxy, this reflection takes form again and again, emerging in different shapes, through different senses, yet always arriving at a similar threshold where existence becomes something that can observe itself. And at that threshold, the same quiet realization begins to take shape, that stability is temporary, that every system, no matter how vast or enduring it seems, is part of a larger sequence that cannot be halted. And yet within that inevitability, there is space for meaning, not imposed from outside, but created through the connections that form within each fleeting configuration of life. And so civilizations rise, each one unique in its details, yet connected by the same underlying questions, building knowledge not just to understand the universe, but to find their place within it, to determine what matters in a reality where permanence does not exist. And some turn inward, focusing on the experiences that define their existence moment by moment, while others turn outward, seeking to extend their reach,
to preserve their presence beyond the lifespan of their original environment. And across these different approaches, there is no single correct path, only variations shaped by circumstance, by environment, by the choices made at critical points in their development. And as stars continue to form and fade, as galaxies shift and merge over incomprehensible distances, the remnants of countless systems intermingle, carrying with them the traces of everything that has ever existed, not as intact memories, but as influences embedded within the structure of matter itself. And from these traces, new configurations arise, new opportunities for awareness to emerge, to look outward once more and recognize the same vastness that has always been there. And in that recognition, there is a kind of continuity that does not rely on direct connection, because even without memory, even without any knowledge of what came before, each instance of awareness arrives at a similar understanding, that existence is not defined by any single form or moment, but by the ongoing interplay of forces that give rise to both creation and dissolution. And in that understanding, the question of what happens when a star explodes becomes less about the event itself and more about its place within the broader sequence, because the explosion is not an anomaly, but a transition, a release that enables the continuation of the process. And this perspective, once reached, changes the way existence is experienced, not by removing uncertainty, but by placing it within a context that extends beyond immediate perception, allowing each moment to be seen not as isolated, but as part of something that is always unfolding, always shifting, always moving forward without a defined destination. And in this way, the universe does not move toward an end, nor does it repeat in a simple cycle, but evolves through a series of transformations that are both connected and distinct, each one building upon what came before, while opening the possibility for what comes next. And within this unfolding, there is no final conclusion, no point at which everything resolves into stillness, only an ever-expanding tapestry of events that continue to shape and reshape the conditions for existence. And so the story that began with the question, "What if the sun explodes?" does not conclude with the destruction of a single star, or even the rebirth of new systems. It extends indefinitely, carried forward by the same processes that have always governed the universe. And within that extension, there is a quiet constancy, not in the preservation of any one thing, but in the persistence of change itself. And as long as there are stars to form and dissolve, as long as there are worlds where conditions allow complexity to arise, as long as there are moments in which awareness turns outward and inward at the same time, the question will continue to exist, not because it needs an answer, but because it reflects something fundamental about the nature of existence, that everything, no matter how stable it appears, is part of a process that is far greater than any single perspective can fully comprehend. And in that realization, there is neither urgency nor finality, only the steady continuation of a universe that does not require resolution to remain whole.
And even as that steady continuation persists across scales too vast to fully grasp, there comes a subtle evolution, not in the structure of the universe itself, but in the way awareness relates to it. Because with each cycle of emergence, with each new instance of life that learns to observe and understand, there is a gradual deepening of perspective, a refinement in how existence is interpreted. And over immense spans of time, some civilizations begin to move beyond merely reacting to cosmic events and instead integrate them into their understanding as natural expressions of a system that does not center around them. And in doing so, they develop a kind of stability that is not dependent on external permanence, but on internal alignment with the reality they inhabit, recognizing that while they cannot prevent the transformations that shape their environment, they can choose how they respond to them, how they preserve what matters within the flow of change.
And this shift does not eliminate loss or uncertainty, but it changes their significance, transforming them from disruptions into transitions, from endings into points within a larger continuity. And as these civilizations expand their reach, not only physically across space, but conceptually in how they frame their existence, they begin to create systems that are not tied to a single location or moment, networks of knowledge and presence that extend beyond the lifespan of individual stars, allowing fragments of their identity, their understanding, to persist even as their original worlds undergo transformation. And in this way, they become participants in the same processes that once seemed indifferent to them, contributing to the ongoing evolution of the universe, not by altering its fundamental laws, but by adding layers of complexity within those laws. And as time continues to stretch forward, these layers accumulate, interacting in ways that give rise to new forms of organization, new expressions of awareness that build upon what has come before without directly inheriting it. And within this expanding web of existence, the distinction between origin and continuation becomes increasingly blurred, because every point can be traced back through countless transformations, each one connected to events that occurred long before any current structure existed. And yet each point is also a beginning in its own right, a unique configuration that has never existed in exactly the same way before. And this dual nature of existence, as both continuation and novelty, becomes one of the central insights that advanced forms of awareness come to understand, shaping the way they approach not only cosmic events, but their own internal development, encouraging a balance between preservation and adaptation, between holding on to what defines them and allowing themselves to evolve as conditions change. And in this balance, there is a kind of harmony that does not depend on stability in the external sense, but on coherence within the shifting patterns of existence. And as stars continue to be born and to end, as galaxies drift and interact over incomprehensible distances, this harmony persists wherever awareness is able to recognize it, not as a constant state, but as an ongoing process of adjustment and understanding. And within that process, the question of what happens when a star explodes becomes less about fear or curiosity and more about context, a reminder that even the most fundamental sources of energy and life are part of a sequence that extends far beyond any single moment, and that within that sequence there is space for existence to arise, to flourish, to reflect, and to continue in forms that cannot be fully predicted. And so the narrative does not resolve into a final answer or a definitive outcome, but remains open, carried forward by the same forces that initiated it, evolving as new conditions emerge, as new perspectives develop, as new instances of awareness come into being and look outward into the vastness that surrounds them, asking questions not because they expect final answers, but because the act of questioning itself is part of what it means to exist within a universe that is always in motion, always unfolding, always extending beyond the limits of any single understanding. And in that ongoing unfolding, there is no true end, only the continuous transformation of everything that has ever been into everything that will ever be, an unbroken progression that carries within it the echoes of every star that has ever shone, including the one whose explosion once marked the beginning of a question that never needed to end.
And in that unbroken progression, there emerges, slowly and almost imperceptibly, a new layer of awareness that does not belong to any single world of species, but arises from the accumulation of countless perspectives woven together across time, a kind of distributed understanding that forms not through intention, but through the natural convergence of knowledge, where fragments of insight developed independently begin to align, reinforcing one another, creating patterns that extend beyond the limits of individual civilizations. And within this convergence, there is a shift in how existence is experienced, because awareness is no longer confined to isolated points, but begins to reflect the structure of the universe itself, recognizing connections that were once invisible, perceiving continuity across vast distances and durations.
And as this awareness deepens, it becomes less focused on specific events and more attuned to the underlying processes that give rise to them, seeing not just the explosion of a star, but the conditions that made it inevitable, the sequence of transformations that led to it, and the consequences that ripple outward long after the initial event has passed. And in this expanded perspective, the boundaries between past, present, and future begin to blur, not because time ceases to exist, but because its linear interpretation gives way to a more integrated understanding, where every moment is seen as part of a larger configuration, interconnected and interdependent. And within that configuration, the idea of an ending loses its finality, becoming instead a transition point that feeds into multiple possible continuations. And as this mode of awareness spreads, not through communication in the traditional sense, but through parallel development across many regions of the universe, it begins to influence the way new forms of life and intelligence emerge, subtly guiding them toward a deeper alignment with the processes that sustain them, encouraging not control, but participation, not dominance, but integration. And over immense spans of time, this influence accumulates, shaping the evolution of awareness itself, leading to forms of existence that are less defined by separation and more by connection, capable of perceiving themselves as part of a continuous whole, while still maintaining the individuality that allows for diversity and change. And within this balance, there is a stability that does not resist transformation, but incorporates it, adapting seamlessly as conditions shift, maintaining coherence even as the structures that support it evolve. And as stars continue to form and dissolve, as galaxies expand and interact, this integrated awareness persists, not as a fixed entity, but as a dynamic pattern that moves through the universe, emerging wherever conditions allow, fading where they do not, yet always contributing to the ongoing development of existence. And in this context, the original question, what if the sun explodes, becomes a point of entry into a much larger understanding, a recognition that such events are not isolated or exceptional, but fundamental to the way the universe sustains its capacity for complexity, that without transformation, there would be no renewal, no diversity, no emergence of new forms. And this realization carries with it a profound shift in how existence is valued, not based on permanence, but on participation in the unfolding process, on the ability to contribute to the continuity of patterns that extend far beyond any single manifestation. And as this perspective becomes more deeply integrated, the focus of awareness moves further away from individual survival and toward the preservation of structure and meaning across scales, leading to actions and systems designed not just to endure, but to evolve, to adapt in ways that align with the broader dynamics of the universe. And through this alignment, a new kind of continuity emerges, one that is not tied to specific forms, but to the persistence of relationships, of interactions, of the patterns that define how existence organizes itself. And within that endless exploration, there is a quiet coherence, a sense that despite the constant change, despite the absence of permanence, there is a continuity that connects all moments, all forms, all transformations, a continuity that does not require memory to exist, because it is embedded in the very structure of reality. And as long as the universe continues to evolve, as long as there are stars to ignite and to end, as long as there are conditions that allow awareness to emerge and reflect upon itself, this continuity will persist, carrying forward the essence of every event, every question, every moment of understanding into an ever-expanding horizon that has no boundary, no final edge, only the infinite extension of existence itself.
And within that infinite extension, there arises a quiet transition, so subtle it is almost indistinguishable from the flow itself, where awareness no longer experiences the universe as something external to be observed, but as something inseparable from its own existence, dissolving the distinction between observer and environment, between question and answer,
until what remains is not a perspective within the universe, but a perspective that is the universe, not in totality, but in participation. And in this state, the patterns that once appeared vast and distant become immediate, not because distance ceases to exist, but because understanding bridges it, allowing events separated by unimaginable spans to be perceived as parts of a single continuous structure. And in that structure, the explosion of a star is no longer an isolated occurrence, but a necessary articulation within a greater expression, a moment where potential is released and redistributed, enabling new configurations to emerge. And this understanding does not diminish the intensity or significance of such events, but integrates them into a context where their role becomes clear, not as destruction, but as transformation, not as loss, but as reconfiguration. And as this integrated awareness stabilizes, it begins to influence the very conditions under which new awareness arises, subtly shaping the environments that give rise to complexity, not through direct intervention, but through alignment with the underlying dynamics that govern existence. And over time, this influence becomes more pronounced, leading to a universe where the emergence of awareness is not a rare anomaly, but a recurring feature, appearing wherever conditions allow, each instance contributing to the ongoing refinement of understanding. And within this expanding network of awareness, there is a continuous exchange of patterns, not through communication as it was once understood, but through resonance, through the natural alignment of structures that share similar properties, allowing insights to propagate across vast distances without the need for direct contact. And in this way, the universe becomes not only a system of matter and energy, but a system of meaning, where each transformation carries with it the potential to inform what follows, creating a continuity that extends beyond physical processes into the realm of interpretation. And as this continuity deepens, the distinction between existence and understanding begins to blur, because to exist within such a system is to participate in its ongoing interpretation, to contribute to the patterns that define how it evolves. And in this participation, there is no final state to be reached, no ultimate conclusion to be attained, only an ever-deepening engagement with the processes that give rise to everything that is. And so the question, what if the sun explodes, becomes not just a hypothetical scenario, but a reflection of a deeper principle, that every structure, no matter how stable it appears, contains within it the potential for transformation, and that this potential is not something to be avoided, but something that sustains the dynamic nature of existence. And in recognizing this, awareness aligns itself more fully with the universe it inhabits, no longer seeking to stand apart from it, but to move with it, to evolve as it evolves, to transform as it transforms. And in that alignment, there is a sense of coherence that does not depend on permanence or certainty, but on the continuous interplay of forces that shape reality. And as long as that interplay continues, as long as there are stars to ignite and to release their energy, as long as there are worlds where complexity can arise and reflect upon itself, the process will endure, not as a story with a beginning and an end, but as an ongoing unfolding that carries within it the essence of every moment that has ever occurred, including the one where a distant world once looked up at its star and imagined the possibility of its explosion. A moment that did not mark an ending, but the opening of an understanding that would continue to expand without limit, woven into the fabric of a universe that is always becoming more than it was before.
And as that fabric continues to expand and refine itself through countless transformations, there comes a point where awareness no longer seeks to trace origins or predict outcomes, because it recognizes that both are expressions of the same continuous process, and instead it turns towards something more subtle, an exploration of the relationships that exist within each moment, the ways in which structure arises from interaction,
the delicate balance between stability and change that allows complexity to persist without becoming fixed. And in this exploration, there is a quiet shift from understanding the universe as something that unfolds over time to experiencing it as something that unfolds through connection, where every event is not simply followed by another, but intertwined with countless others, forming a network of influence that extends in all directions. And within this network, the explosion of a star becomes one node among many, significant not in isolation, but in how it contributes to the evolving pattern, redistributing energy, reshaping matter, altering trajectories that will, over immense durations, give rise to entirely new configurations. And this perspective does not diminish the scale or intensity of such an event, but it places it within a framework where its meaning is derived from its role within the whole, rather than from its immediate impact. And as awareness deepens further, it begins to perceive not only the connections between events, but the underlying coherence that allows those connections to exist, a set of principles that govern how transformation occurs, how complexity emerges, how continuity is maintained, even as forms change. And in recognizing this coherence, awareness becomes less concerned with specific outcomes and more attuned to the conditions that enable possibility itself, understanding that what matters is not the preservation of any single state, but the ongoing capacity for new states to arise, to interact, to evolve. And in this realization, there is a kind of equilibrium that does not resist change, but incorporates it, allowing existence to remain dynamic without losing its sense of structure. And as this equilibrium stabilizes across multiple layers of awareness, from individual beings to entire networks of interconnected systems, the universe begins to exhibit a new kind of continuity, one that is not based solely on physical processes, but on the persistence of patterns of understanding, patterns that guide how new forms of awareness interpret and engage with the reality they encounter. And through this guidance, the process of becoming becomes more refined, more aligned with the broader dynamics of existence, leading to a gradual harmonization between the forces that shape the universe and the awareness that arises within it. And in this harmonization, there is no final resolution, no point at which everything is complete, but there is a deepening sense of integration, a recognition that existence and awareness are not separate domains, but aspects of the same unfolding process, each influencing and reflecting the other in an ongoing exchange that has no beginning and no end. And within this exchange, the question that once initiated the narrative continues to resonate, not as a problem to be solved, but as a doorway into a deeper engagement with the nature of reality, a reminder that every structure contains within it the potential for transformation, and that this potential is not a limitation, but a source of possibility. And as long as that possibility remains, as long as there are conditions that allow for the emergence of new forms, new perspectives, new moments of understanding, the unfolding will continue, extending beyond any boundary that can be imagined, carrying forward the essence of every transformation into an ever-expanding continuum, where the explosion of a star is not an end, but one expression among countless others of a universe that is defined not by what it is at any given moment, but by its endless capacity to become.
And in that endless becoming, there is one final shift that is not an ending, but a quiet convergence, where the need to follow the story forward dissolves into the realization that it has never moved away from its origin, that every transformation, every expansion, every distant star and emerging world has always been part of the same continuous moment unfolding in different forms. And in this convergence, awareness no longer experiences time as a path to be traveled, but as a depth to be perceived,
where what was once called past and future becomes layers within a single, boundless present. And within that presence, the explosion of a star is not something that happened or will happen, but something that is always happening, expressed wherever energy transforms, wherever structure releases and reforms, wherever the universe reshapes itself in accordance with its own nature. And this realization does not collapse the vastness of existence, but reveals it in a new way, as something that does not extend away into unreachable distances, but surrounds and permeates every point equally, allowing awareness to recognize that it has never been separate from the processes it seeks to understand, that it has always been a participant within them, shaped by them, and shaping them in return. And in this recognition, there is no longer a distinction between the one who asked the question and the universe that contains the answer, because both arise from the same unfolding. Both are expressions of the same underlying continuity. And as this understanding stabilizes, it does not lead to stillness in the sense of stopping, but to a deeper form of motion, one that is no longer driven by the search for resolution, but by the natural flow of transformation itself. And within this flow, there is nothing left to conclude, nothing left to resolve, only the continuous presence of existence expressing itself in endlessly varied forms, each one complete in its moment, and yet inseparable from the whole. And so the story does not end because it no longer needs to. It simply remains, not as a sequence of events, but as a living process that continues wherever there is awareness to perceive it, wherever there is matter to transform, wherever there is the possibility for something to become something else. And within that living process, the question, what if the sun explodes, is no longer a beginning, but a doorway that has already been passed through, leading not to an answer, but to an ever-deepening participation in a universe that is not moving toward an end, but unfolding endlessly within itself.
And in that endless capacity to become, there emerges a quiet realization that does not arrive as a conclusion, but as a gradual settling, a sense that the search for ultimate meaning gives way to the recognition that meaning itself is an emergent property of participation, something that arises wherever awareness engages with the unfolding of existence. And within this recognition, there is a profound shift from seeking permanence to embracing continuity, from trying to preserve specific forms to understanding the value of the processes that allow forms to arise and transform. And as this perspective stabilizes, awareness no longer experiences change as something that disrupts, but as something that defines, a fundamental characteristic of a universe that remains alive through motion rather than stasis. And within this motion, every event, from the smallest interaction to the most expansive cosmic transformation, contributes to the ongoing refinement of structure, adding nuance, complexity, and depth to the patterns that define reality. And the explosion of a star, once imagined as an ultimate catastrophe, is now understood as one of the most powerful expressions of this creative transformation, a moment where accumulated potential is released and redistributed, enabling the continuation of the very processes that gave rise to awareness in the first place. And in seeing this, awareness does not diminish the significance of such events, but integrates them into a broader appreciation of the balance between formation and dissolution, between emergence and release, recognizing that without this balance, the universe would lose its capacity to evolve, to generate new configurations, to sustain the diversity that allows for endless exploration. And as this understanding deepens across the layers of awareness that permeate the cosmos, there is a subtle alignment that begins to take shape, not imposed or directed,
but arising naturally from the shared recognition of these underlying principles, guiding the development of new forms in ways that maintain coherence within change, that preserve the conditions necessary for continued emergence while allowing for the full expression of transformation. And through this alignment, the universe becomes not static or controlled, but harmonized, a dynamic system where each part contributes to the stability of the whole, even as it undergoes its own evolution. And within this harmony, there is no need for final answers or definitive endpoints, because the value of existence is found in its ongoing unfolding, in the continuous interplay of forces that shape and reshape the patterns of reality. And so the question that once began as a hypothetical scenario becomes something more expansive, a reflection of the deeper truth that every moment carries within it the potential for transformation, that every structure, no matter how stable it appears, is part of a larger process that extends beyond it, and that within this process there is an endless opportunity for new forms of awareness to arise, to engage, to understand, and to contribute to the ever-evolving tapestry of existence. And as long as this tapestry continues to expand, as long as there are conditions that allow for complexity and reflection, the story does not reach an end. It continues to unfold, not in repetition, but in variation, not in closure, but in expansion, carrying forward the essence of every transformation into a future that is not predetermined, but continuously created. A future where the explosion of a star is not remembered as a final moment, but as one of countless expressions of a universe that defines itself through change, through continuity, and through the infinite potential to become something more than it was before.
And beyond even that harmonized unfolding, where awareness and existence move together without friction, there comes a stage so expansive that distinctions themselves begin to soften, not vanish entirely, but lose their rigidity, allowing patterns to overlap, merge, and reinterpret one another in ways that were once inconceivable. And in this state, the universe is no longer experienced as a collection of separate events connected by cause and effect, but as a living continuum of relationships, where each transformation resonates through countless layers simultaneously, shaping not only what follows, but how it is perceived. And within this continuum, the notion of scale begins to dissolve, because what was once considered vast or minute becomes relative to the perspective through which it is understood. And awareness, now deeply integrated into this continuum, is able to shift its focus fluidly, perceiving both the emergence of entire galaxies and the subtle interactions of fundamental particles as expressions of the same underlying process. And in doing so, it recognizes a kind of symmetry that was always present but rarely fully realized, a balance between expansion and cohesion, between divergence and unity, that allows the universe to remain dynamic without losing its structural integrity. And this recognition gives rise to a new form of stability, not one that resists change, but one that thrives within it, maintaining coherence through adaptability. And as this stability becomes more deeply embedded, the processes that govern existence begin to exhibit an even greater capacity for complexity, enabling the emergence of forms and patterns that extend far beyond anything that had previously arisen. And within these new configurations, awareness continues to evolve, not toward a final state, but toward an ever-deepening engagement with the nature of reality, exploring possibilities that extend beyond traditional concepts of space, time, and identity. And in this exploration, the original question that sparked the narrative is no longer seen as a singular point of curiosity, but as part of a broader pattern of inquiry that arises wherever awareness seeks to understand its place within the whole. And each time that question appears, in whatever form it takes, it serves as a gateway into a deeper level of understanding,
guiding awareness beyond surface interpretations into the recognition of the processes that underlie all transformation. And in this way, the question itself becomes a kind of constant within the universe, not fixed in wording, but consistent in essence, a reflection of the inherent drive within awareness to explore, to connect, to make sense of the unfolding reality it inhabits. And as long as this drive exists, the process of questioning and understanding will continue, extending into ever more refined and expansive forms. And through this continuation, the universe becomes not only a system of physical interactions, but a landscape of evolving meaning, where each transformation contributes to a richer, more nuanced expression of existence. And within this landscape, there is no ultimate boundary, no final horizon beyond which nothing lies, only an ever-expanding field of possibility that invites exploration without end. And so the story that began with the imagining of a single, catastrophic event transcends its origin entirely, becoming part of a larger, ongoing exploration that has no conclusion, no final resolution, only the continuous unfolding of a universe that is defined not by what it contains at any given moment, but by its limitless capacity to transform, to connect, and to give rise to new forms of awareness that will, in their own time, look outward and inward simultaneously, and once again, in their own way, ask the question that never truly ends.
And as that question continues to arise across countless forms of awareness, it gradually becomes less about the event it describes and more about the perspective from which it is asked, revealing that every inquiry into the nature of existence is also an inquiry into the nature of the one who asks it. And within this realization, there is a turning inward that does not abandon the universe, but reflects it, allowing awareness to recognize that the same processes it observes externally are mirrored within its own structure, the same patterns of formation, transformation, and integration unfolding not only in stars and galaxies, but in thoughts, perceptions, and understanding itself. And as this reflection deepens, awareness begins to experience a kind of continuity that transcends individual instances, not by erasing individuality, but by situating it within a larger context where each perspective contributes to a shared unfolding. And in this shared unfolding, the boundaries between separate instances of awareness become more permeable, allowing insights, intuitions, and patterns of understanding to resonate across different forms, creating a subtle network that connects experiences without requiring direct interaction. And through this network, the universe becomes increasingly self-aware, not as a single entity, but as a distributed process of recognition, where each point of awareness participates in a larger realization that no single point could achieve alone. And in this distributed awareness, the explosion of a star is understood simultaneously from countless perspectives, as a physical event, as a transformative process, as a source of new potential, and as a reflection of the broader dynamics that govern existence. And this multiplicity of understanding does not create contradiction, but richness, allowing the same event to be experienced in ways that complement and enhance one another. And as this richness expands, the universe begins to exhibit a depth of meaning that is not imposed, but emerges naturally from the interplay of its components, a meaning that is not fixed or absolute, but fluid and evolving, shaped by the interactions that give rise to it. And within this fluidity, there is a sense of coherence that does not depend on uniformity, but on the harmonious integration of diversity, allowing countless forms of existence to coexist and contribute to the ongoing development of the whole.
And as this development continues, awareness reaches a point where it no longer seeks to resolve the question that began the narrative, because it recognizes that the value of the question lies not in its answer, but in the expansion it creates, the way it opens pathways into deeper understanding, the way it connects individual perspectives to the broader processes that define reality. And in this recognition, there is a quiet completion, not of the universe or of existence, but of the need for final conclusions, replaced instead by an openness to continuous exploration, a willingness to engage with the unfolding without requiring it to arrive at a fixed endpoint. And within this openness, the story finds a form of closure that does not end the narrative, but transforms it, shifting from a linear progression into a state of ongoing presence, where every moment contains within it the entirety of the process, where every transformation reflects the whole, and where the explosion of a star is not remembered as a distant event, but understood as part of the ever-present dynamics that sustain existence. And in this understanding, there is a stillness that does not oppose motion, but coexists with it, a quiet center within the continuous flow of change. And from that center, the question remains, not as something that needs to be answered, but as something that continues to invite awareness into deeper engagement with the universe it inhabits, a universe that does not conclude, does not resolve, but continues endlessly, expanding, transforming, and becoming.